So let's start then the presentation. Thank you everyone for attending tonight to this first webinar of the 2024. I have the pleasure to start the sessions this year by talking a little bit about Power BI. My name is Vera Barcés, and I'm the treasurer of the AAC Australian section. So a little bit of myself. I've been working in project controls for around a decade, and I'm a civil engineer, but somehow I ended up doing project controls. Basically, all my experiences on project controls. I've done cost control, I've done planning and scheduling, and I've done a lot of P6 schedules. I've done portfolio management and reporting, because at the end of the day, everything or every role we do in project controls has to be conveyed somehow to a report, and then decisions are made based on those. I'm a certified cost professional by the AAC International. There is a very nice list of certifications that you can get from the AACE that certifies your knowledge in cost engineering. I've been also lucky enough to be chartered by Australia, the Engineers Australia as well, on cost engineering. I've done projects in infrastructure, mining, and recently started as well a nice journey into the oil and gas industry. And very recent, I would say around 2 months ago, I got the Microsoft certification in Power BI. So I got the PL 300 certification that basically certifies that I'm qualified enough to use and implement Power BI. Now, the topic for today, this is kind of the content I prepare for us. I'll talk about a little bit of the context and the industry in a quick introduction. I'll quickly go through what's Power BI and how it can be used in project controls. I'll explain 2 case studies. Those are based on real life. I'm not going to disclose any company's name just to protect them. And I'll go through some lessons learned and limitations and opportunities for the future. And then we'll finally, at the end, we'll have some time to discuss if there's anything that you guys are interested in discussing. I wanted to start by kind of relating the topic of reporting into the AACE context. So the AACE, for those who are not familiar, the AAC, it's been around for quite a long time. I would say around 40 years. And the AAC, it has been providing processes and practices on project and portfolio management. The approach of the AAC is to provide support to effectively manage the total life cycle of any cost investment. And when we talk about cost investment, it basically refers to program, a portfolio, or a project that the organization or the company or the business wants to implement. Now, we have to be careful when we mention the word cost in the AACE context. Cost is referring to everything that is required to deliver a project. And what's required normally, we need time to deliver a project, we need cost, we need the money, we need human resources, we need materials, and all of those are part of what the AAC defines as cost. Those are just a very quick explanation about what cost means in the AAC international context. Now, so what I was trying to depict in this slide is basically how the AAC treats the reporting process on any project. So the AAC standards are based on continuous improvement approach. You'll see that this process map, for example, has four colors that are referring to different steps in the continuous improvement process. It's based on plan, do, check, and act, which is very interesting because that promotes, as I said, continuous improvement. And obviously the AAC gives some examples and processes around how to assess the cost performance, resource performance, schedule performance, earned value, and so on. And it will give you some processes associated with how to measure performance in projects, processes that are related. For example, a project control plan, we should have one, changes, how affects, and then we will review the performance, and then we act based on that. We review and then make decisions on that, and then the cycle repeats itself. Typically, in project controls, we are normally worried about schedule-related reports. We are also interested in developing cost reports, change management reports, quantity reports, contract and procurement reports, and risks as well. So there's many kind of reports that we use in project management, and it will depend as well on the intentions and I guess objectives of the business. So what's been happening, or what continues to happen in the project controls space, is a process like the one that I'm depicting here in this slide. Typically, before we issue a report, what happens is we get data from a different source. It could be an external software, could be existing legacy softwares that the organization uses, or could be spreadsheets coming from different other stakeholders. Normally, what we do is process the data, we integrate it in Excel. That's basically, I'm tempted to say that Excel is the only tool that we normally use for processing data from different sources. We format the reports in Excel, we do all the lookups, we do formulas, formulas, and we check the formulas, and then we produce a normally beautiful report in Excel or PDF. We produce scopes, we do cost reports, schedule summaries. That's the kind of framework that I've been working for the last 10 years, basically. And it's been working fine, you know, it works okay. It's easy to share when you get a report in Excel to somebody else. It's easy for them to interpret, to read, to consume, and it's easy to audit as well, right? Because you can simply open the file that you are being shared, and you can press F2 and track formulas, and you can track the data from pivot tables, and so on. It works fine. However, I've been facing a lot of challenges with this approach, and it's basically inefficiency. I was very inefficient on producing project control reports, and normally it gives the sense that the project control team is insufficient to produce a specific set of reports. So it makes us believe that we need more resources in the project controls, and then you end up having 15 people, 20 people in the project controls team for an individual project. And the other thing that happened, and very frequently actually, is that we are always exposed to errors because there's been a person behind this report, a person editing formulas in Excel, which increases the risk of making mistakes. And it's been, the reports produced on this approach are very, very static, meaning that they cannot correlate to previous periods reports, and they are not interactive with the user. So normally if you want to give a lot of sort of visuals, you can't consolidate one in one page. You can't create a dashboard that will give you the chance to interact. Instead, it will give you many pages in PDF. Right, so what I did over the last, I say 4 years, when I started my work experience in Australia, is try to use Power BI. I tried to replace Power BI in the last 2 steps in this process. On formatting, instead of doing lookups, I was doing queries in Power BI. I was not doing formulas. I was doing DAX formulas, just a little bit different. And then I was producing a report that will be shareable as a link rather than on the PDF. I will produce the same kind of reports, and I will see later on in the 2 case studies that I will present what are the reports that I built and how it actually helped in the personal context, but also in the organization and project control team context. Yeah, so how Power BI works? So probably Power BI is not a very new tool. It's been around for a while. I would say 10 years, and many organizations are already using that. But in the context of Power Project Controls, Power BI will be used in the same in the following way. So we'll get the data from different sources, same way we would do it with an Excel or the basic or the business as usual approach. We'll get data from SharePoint, Microsoft projects, P6. We'll get from Aconex. We'll get SAP data for actual cost or transactions. We'll get sometimes data from more sophisticated tools like Contrand, which is project controls software that sometimes can consume data from other sources such as P6 and SAP. Innate and Ecosys also are very strong tools that work in the same way. Typically, these ones are very expensive and very powerful, I would say, yes, because it gives you the chance to interact or consume data from other sources. The problem is that typically these tools, they consume snapshots of data from P6, for example. They're not connected in a live manner. So that's one of the issues with softwares. You still have to download your P6 data and upload it manually into these softwares if you want to do reports using these softwares. So we'll consume all this data into Power BI. We'll use Power BI Desktop, which is an application by Microsoft, similar to Excel, similar to SharePoint, and you will be able to manipulate, transform the data using Power Query, and then that will be published in the Power BI service. Yeah, so that report and then is shared with different business users. Somebody needs to do the modeling of these reports, and that's probably the most challenging part in this process, because there has to be a person there in the team that is able to use Power BI Desktop well. Now, there's different levels when we use Power BI in an organization, when we implement, right? So there's a personal level, there's a team BI level, departmental BI, and enterprise BI. So the impact of each level will be different, and the personal obviously will be the less impactful, I would say. And it's basically the case in which an individual uses Power BI in their computer and doesn't necessarily share it with anybody else. But it drives kind of automation. It drives agility. The team BI level is more focused on process, and it drives collaboration because you are able to share, to connect to different data sources and share as well the reports with everybody else. Departmental is it's a bit different. It consumes a large amount of data, and there's a large number of consumers as well. And enterprise, that's when, so we consume even more data and we target many more consumers. So for this presentation, the 2 cases I'm going to go through are sitting under this team BI level. It actually started as being personal BI effort. It was a personal initiative at the beginning, and then it was well accepted by the rest of the team, and it became a team BI kind of approach on both projects that I'm going to explain. All right, so I'll go to the first of the 2 case studies. The first case study is in a portfolio in the rail infrastructure industry, and the second case study is more an individual project. It was a multi-billion project that had so much data, and Power BI was able to help us on the reporting aspect. All right, so going to the first case. So the first case, as I said, it was a PMO. Was working for it was a rail operator. The projects we had in the portfolio were ranging from $4 to $40 million. We had around 12 to 16 projects happening simultaneously. There were different levels in the reporting requirements. We required reports that were on the portfolio level, in which you see the big picture of what's the portfolio looking, what are the projects that conform this portfolio. But we also needed some reports for individual projects, so project managers can see what's the status of their projects and drill into more specific details of the project. And then we had a different requirement for managing contractors, especially on bigger projects that were around the $30 or $40 million. We had awarded contracts to contractors, and so we needed to somehow control that and being able to produce reports from data that come from contractors. So three levels of reporting were necessary. We were using Primavera P6 as the scheduling tool. We were using the EPPM service, which is the cloud service of Primavera P6. Normally, we were doing monthly updates. We were only 2 schedulers for all this number of schedules. So a lot of the time were concentrated on updating Primavera schedules. We were having a lot of data as well sitting in SharePoint lists. Yeah, and somehow we had to integrate those in reports. So the visual here, it's basically the business as usual reporting architecture. We collect all the data from Excel, P6, SharePoint, and then we produce static reports from this data using Excel and then PDF. Yeah, so we were able to produce these reports only. Given the vast amount of work, we weren't able to produce contractor kind of reports. We were more receiving the data from contractors and trying to read their PDFs. So it was a very difficult, and we didn't have a visibility or transparency on that level as much. So what happened is the Power BI Pro licenses were already deployed across the organization, so it was very easy. We just had to request to the IT team to give us 1 license. They had no issue with that because they had the cost of a Pro license is only $12 per month, and normally the IT budget can cover that. So there wasn't any issue around the licensing. We were using SharePoint as a data repository, so we were hosting the XCR files from P6 and in SharePoint, and we were hosting spreadsheets in SharePoint as well. So basically, our data warehouse was SharePoint, and we were able to produce reports for these 3 levels and share the grant access accordingly, so that a person that is below sort of the project team or in that kind of hierarchy cannot access the sensitive information that might be in the portfolio kind of reports. So we were able to grant access accordingly based on roles in Power BI. The data modeling, it was medium. It wasn't too hard to integrate different data sources. Lists are very friendly with Power BI, lists from SharePoint, I mean. Probably the most difficult one was to be able to pull the data from P6. At the end, it was a static data snapshots as well that were living in SharePoint. We weren't able to connect straight to the data source of EPPM. It was difficult. We weren't able to meet the requirements from the IT safety perspective. As I said, we were using SharePoint as a data repository. We were producing the 3 levels of reporting. Capital projects planning, we were calling that pipeline report. We were able to produce 3-week look-aheads from P6 data, milestone report from P6 data, and schedule quality reports as well, just doing some checks on the quality of the schedule. And finally, we had some reports at the contractor level as well. So we're consuming data from contractors in a different way, rather than consuming data in PDFs and define or out-of-the-box sort of reports from contractors. We were consuming data in a different way. We were using data, raw data, and then process it in Power BI. Finally, all those reports were living in a reporting portal that we created in SharePoint, which is nothing else but a website in SharePoint. So people were going to this SharePoint site and clicking on the different reporting that they are interested in. And according to their role, they will or will not be able to see some of the reports. All right, so I will go to the first. Now, how do I remove point? Okay, I'm just going to go back to I'm going to go to the reports. So this is the reporting platform or portal that we created in SharePoint. You see here is nothing else but just a website in SharePoint, and you will click here on these links and you'll get to the different levels of reporting. I'm going to go to the portfolio reports for you to take a look. You have to log in with your credentials. Now, right now we are in an application, Power BI application environment right now. And the first report we put together is this dashboard that's giving us an overview of what projects are happening at the moment and what projects are potentially coming up to our portfolio. We were categorizing projects based on probabilities from 0, 10%, 20%, and so on until 100%. That basically represented that the project is fully funded and is under execution. 90% will probably be on the last gate on the funding approval, and will be very likely to go and to come on our pipeline, and so on. As we go down, 10% will probably a project that is at the moment an idea that hasn't probably been presented to the client, and we're not ready yet to use cost profiles from these projects yet. We were able to have this summary. We were just a pie chart here that divided or split the projects based on our client. We had DOT and the Metro Tunnel project, the Suburban Rail Loop, level crossing removals, and so on. So these were our clients basically that were funding our projects. We had some areas within our company that were delivering these projects as well, and we were able to track and see what are the teams that are most busy or having more projects. We had projects under different phases as well, different stages. Some of them, 23 were in concept and so on, and we were 8 in current delivery. Yeah, and we had a profile here as well per year and give us an idea how much revenue we will get for the next 4 or 5 years. Yeah, and this is the main kind of result that we were interested in from this report, because based on this, the company can predict and plan the resources for attending these projects. And then here, this table will select the top 3 most important projects. And by most important, I mean the most expensive and with the most probable revenue. But this is a quick dashboard, nothing probably special about this. You can always interact with them. So you can click on the 100% and see, okay, so there's 22 with 100% probability to happen. So they already have funding, and you can see what teams are going to deliver those projects. And you can see what is the money that you are expecting from these projects over the next 5 years. There's another visual for understanding what the status are individual projects, which, by the way, you can straight away go from this by clicking and drilling through. So it'll take you to the details tab. Perhaps the most interesting part of this set of reports is this cost profile. So as I said, we were interested in looking the horizon of projects and see how much work we're going to have so that we can plan our resources, right? So you were able to see this distribution, and to be able to produce this report before Power BI was implemented. I'll go back to the presentation. We were doing this approach, yeah? So we were this business as usual approach first to do that report. But what we were doing is collecting data in Excel from different stakeholders, clients, project managers, and project engineers. And we were doing some calculations in Excel. We're calculating the rough estimate of the projects. We're trying to predict when it's going to start, when it's going to finish. And for 60 projects, it's hard to do the exact kind of cash flow for individual projects. So we were relying on P6 to do the time phase distribution of costs. So we were uploading these Excels with the data we were collecting into P6, using a resource in P6 to distribute the estimate of the project over time, and then download that into Excel, and then produce an S-curve. What happened a lot is that you realize once you do this iteration, you realize that there is some misalignments in the reports that you have to fix. So you have to go back to the data source, do again the new process, recalculate the stuff, uploading again to P6, run P6 again, download the data again, and produce the S-curve in Excel. So this approach was a nightmare for me because I was doing this process and I wasn't happy with this approach. So by adding Power BI, we were able to collect the data in Excel in a table format that will be read, that will be living in SharePoint and will be read by Power BI. Right? And Power BI will do all the time phase distribution using the same capability of profiling the data as P6. For those familiar with P6, P6 can give you the chance to customize your cost profile, could be back end, front end, and gives you the chance to distribute your resource based on the profile you want. And you can actually customize your own profile based on past projects. So in the same way, I used Power BI to read a different table with different profiles that we were able to customize, and then distribute the database based on those profiles and the information we got. And basically what we did is remove P6 from the picture. I didn't want to use P6 anymore, and we were able to remove P6 from this process. And this saved us so much time, because every time there was something that wasn't looking nice, looking okay, we will go straight to the Excel that is the source of the data, and then we will just refresh the Power BI report, and everything will be ready in the report. That's probably the most successful case I've been implemented Power BI. I've been very happy for that result, because from a process, because this report was produced quarterly, it was taking around 2 or 3 weeks to actually produce a very accurate report. By using Power BI, it was probably a week enough to collect the data and do the whole report at once. And so it saved us a lot of time and made the project controls team much more efficient. But also, yeah, you could actually see as well in monthly or quarterly basis. This was very handful for the finance team because they wanted to understand how the forecast is going to look like for the next months and next years. So they were able to download the data from Power BI to export to Excel and get this information as well. So we would share these links to the stakeholders accordingly, and they were able to consume the data in Excel as well. Then we had Gantt views for the projects, which ones are 100% probability. We were able to filter by discipline or by the team that's going to deliver these projects, and so on. So this is the portfolio view for that. We had a milestone report as well that we're using project data from P6. Just a simple summary of when was the data day of the schedule. And we had some milestones within the project to see what are the status of them, right? We had the color code here for flagging what are the milestones that are critical and we have to pay attention to. And then you had some more filters to do, and you could find as well for individual projects as well what required, what are the milestones that are happening, and we were collecting comments as well from P6 data. And we had a kind of classic Gantt view as well. Yeah, and we had project reports. I'll take you there quickly, and then contractor reports. In terms of project level reports, we were interested in looking at the quality of the schedules because we were basically two planners looking over between 12, 16 projects. We had to update them all, and it's very easy to make mistakes when you only have two resources for many projects. So you had to find a way to summarize what are the potential errors and mistakes that we could do. So floats are typically not accepted to have negative floats in P6, so you could filter them here for the whole projects, for the whole portfolio, and see what activities within those projects are having a negative float, and we'll be able to investigate what's happening with this in P6. So this one was making the schedules very, very efficient because they could quickly see as well where are the activities that they need to fix. So metrics that we were measuring in P6. And what else we have here? Trends to see how many activities the portfolio had at the moment. Progress checks, broken activities, checking resources, what activities are having and which ones are not having any resources to see if it's really necessary to have resources. Relationships typically look at the activities that won't have any predecessor, so we can go and check what is happening because activity, but it's preferable to have predecessor and successor always. You don't have floating activities in P6. It's not ideal. And which activities have some constraints as well. 3-week look aheads. You were able to click on the project and see what are the 3-week look ahead. This would be very good to drive meetings because you meet with project managers to get updates and discuss what's coming up and collect updates from activities that are happening and will happen in the next 3 weeks. We had a Gantt view for the next 3 weeks as well. all this data, everything, absolutely everything in this project level reporting were coming from P6. So as long as we uploaded the data into SharePoint, we will be able to refresh this without any manual manipulation, which was very, very good for us. Now, going to the contractor report, we were at the beginning of starting the biggest project for us, and we were trying to find a way to review cost and schedule data at the same time. And this is a good example that Power BI is a good tool to integrate different data sources. So in this first histogram here, you see the profile of the hours required to deliver the job that are inserted in P6. Yeah, so you had the WVS level and you were able to see how many hours are going to be required for a specific WVS. On the right hand, we had the same profile for the same WVS, but looking at money, looking at cost forecast. So the data source for this cost were in Excel, right? Because we don't put money in P6. That's what typically doesn't happen. And we were able to review the cost and the schedule data in one single page. And I like this one because I was able to identify misalignments and things that are not looking okay. So I don't know, to give an example, this P6 data. So you have P6 data, you are saying that to deliver the building works, you are going to take 4 months. However, your cost forecast is only showing 2 months. So what's happening there? See that one of those are not probably correct, or sometimes because there is a time or a lag in between we execute the work and when we invoice it and we sort of cash flow it, that might be acceptable. But cases in which there's 2 or 3, 4 months of difference, then that's not acceptable. And then in that way, you have the chance to make the cost and the schedule team integrate and talk and discuss these kind of things. And obviously, a key enabler on this approach was the WBS, because you have to have an alignment between your schedule and your cost structure, your cost control structure. And I was lucky enough to be involved in the beginning of this project that we were able to request to our contractors to do this alignment, which is a normal and a basic kind of requirement. If you go through the ASCE knowledge and cost management framework, you'll see that a WBS is a basic concept that should apply to cost and everything else in the project. So the WBS drives basically of the control reports for any project. What I noticed is that at least in Australia, in the last 3 projects I've been involved, or 3 assignments, this is not very common. This is not really happening much. The cost control and the schedule team or the planning team are normally working separately, and to me, that is an issue. But anyways, that might be a topic for a different webinar. Anyways, so looking at the time, I'm really running out of time again. All right, so to summarize the outcome, we were able to implement more reports. We were able to prepare the pipeline report. Instead of taking 2 weeks, we were doing that in 3-4 days, really quick, giving us more time to analyze data and implement more necessary reports without needing to onboard new resources, which was beneficial for the organization. We were efficiently controlling the contractor cost and schedule, as I explained in the previous example, and we had much better quality on the schedules. Now, going to the second case. So this one was a $1.5 billion project in Indonesia. We had 170 work packages. It was very challenging for the project controls because we didn't have a cost control system. There wasn't in place. There wasn't anything simply as that. And for such a big project, you have to have one. We didn't have any reporting system. Monthly reports were a nightmare to produce in Excel. And we were a small project controls team. We were just one cost engineer, one change and cost engineer, and one cost lead. And obviously we had a planning team that were composed by 2 planners as well. But because I didn't include the the schedule data for this case study, I'm not mentioning them. We didn't have alignment with the cost transactions, so basically SAP that were recording the transactions, the actual costs were not in line at all with the cost control structure that we established for the project. So all our reports at the beginning were only budget, forecast, and commitment. So we didn't have any actuals incorporated in our cost report. It was basically difficult because you generate, in such a massive project, you generate at least hundreds of 100,000 line items per month of actual costs, and it's difficult to sort of tag every transaction and make it part of your cost control structure. So it's almost impossible. In this case, the data modeling was very complex, and by data modeling I mean the effort and the understanding of data management to being able to interact and connect different tables. So different data sources should be connected to each other somehow, and Power BI does that. So the data modeling of that was actually complex. We didn't have any cash flow report as well, so we didn't know how much we were going to spend for the next upcoming month. So it was really a basic level of reports, and we were trying to survive with Excel. And that's when Power BI came into the picture. Yeah, so what we did is we purchased the BI licenses. IT was happy with supporting on that request, so we didn't have any issue with the Pro licenses. In all the cases I've implemented Power BI, the licensing was never a problem. So because it's really cheap. And we worked really hard on making an alignment with the SAP data. That was a very enabler for us to be able to produce cost reports. We use a Power BI service. So basically in the cloud, we use the Power BI application to post and publish the reports. We were also needing Power BI Point to host Power BI reports because management at the time didn't need a 170 page report. They basically needed a 6 slides to explain where we are in terms of cost for the entire project. So we were using PowerPoint, and we were embedding Power BI reports in them. I'll show you them. I'll show you a bit how that works. We were producing paginated reports as well to produce PDF reports with formatting. That was very handful for people that weren't familiar at all with consuming and reading data in Power BI. Yeah, that is the approach. Cost data, consuming the same data sources, but now querying the data in Power BI and producing the reports as I explained. Cost report, we were using actuals this time. We were facing the data as well and producing cash flows, paginated reports, and we were doing data quality checks as well. Yeah, so I'm going to go to the report. Yeah, so unlike the previous example, we didn't use SharePoint to host Power BI reports. In this case, it was a Power BI application. Yeah, that can combine different or can host different Power BI or many Power BI reports. And the most important one, just to make it quicker, probably is this report, right? So in the past, we were able to produce this report in Excel with all the packages in there, without actual costs, which seems it is unacceptable. So in a cost control environment, you have to see your actual costs besides your forecast, budget, commitment, and variance, right? So that's something that you have to have. So we were able to achieve this table, and the management and users not familiar with Power BI were able to export this into a PDF report, which they can open easily. This is a paginated report, and they can see that in a PDF, and they can share this the way they want. They were able to look for individual packages, and that was the structure and the first achievement in this Power BI implementation. The other report that I wanted to show and highlight in this example is this cost curve. So as I explained in the previous example, we were able to use Power BI and Power Query specifically to be able to distribute the estimate of individual, or the forecast of the individual package over time. But before Power BI, we weren't able to do that, because what you have is you have 170 packages, and forecasting them in over time, it's virtually impossible for our report. So Power BI allowed us to do this report. Again, we had to customize our cost profiles and allocate them to individual packages. And you were able to be what's the cost incurred, what's the plan, and what's the forecast, per month. So this is a huge achievement as well. And you were able to look and find your specific package. If you are a package engineer, then you will be able to see here and find your package that you are delivering, and try to see what's the cost profile for it. Here, so an example here, I think what the biggest one was the K1, the earthworks. You're able to see here and see how you are going in terms of the plan. Yeah. You had percentages as well to see how are we tracking in terms of actual costs. And again, all this can be extracted to Excel for consumption. So going back, I mentioned as well that we were embedding BI reports in PowerPoint. So right now it's loading, but this is actually a window that will display in a live manner one of the reports that I showed previously. So I'll leave it. I'll give it some time to load while we discuss the outcome. So we were able to produce reports. First, we were able to produce a report that wasn't part of the picture before, taking much less time compared to the previous approach. And the monthly report was very easy to produce, because it was actually a real-time snapshot. And then that was straight into the slide deck in PowerPoint, and we were distributing that to management. Very easy. And we increased the collaboration with the team, because everyone knew that we had to work in the specific Excel files, and that was for them, understanding that they work, or their support in working in the specific files is helping to produce the impactful Power BI reports that they were seeing. So they were on board totally on this. Now, I don't think this is working, but I'm going to show you how you do that actually. So you go to insert, and there's this option on Power BI. You have to log in. And then you click here the URL of the Power BI report that you have. Yeah, and then it will be displayed and will be synchronized. So you don't have to copy and paste visuals anymore into Power BI. So this is a very interesting capability of Power BI. Now I'll go to limitations, problems I had. The first one, resistant to change. So many people were not on board with this idea of using Power BI. They were very attached to the typical Excel approach. And that still happens until today. But that's okay, I got used to it. We had some troubles as well maintaining Power BI reports, because when you use a lot of Excel data sources, you tend to do more troubleshooting, which is not ideal. But that was one of the challenges that still happens until today. So it's not perfect. All this world of Power BI, it helps you a lot, but it also brings another limitations as well, which to me are more manageable. There were some data sources that required a lot of cleansing and a lot of transformation, which makes it inefficient, the Power BI performance. The other problem I had is a low understanding of data management in project control people. So the data modeling is one of the examples. So when we talk about data management, there's a few concepts there, and there is no data-driven approach. So we like using Excel and put colors and put table. We don't start creating a table as an entity in Excel, but we create a spreadsheet and we manipulate, we combine tables. We like that, but that's not really helpful when we use Power BI. And the most important probably to me is the alignment, the lack of alignment between cost, schedule, and other aspects in project controls. And when I say not alignment, is because we're not using WBS, we're not using cost control accounts. And that to me is a problem. So we had to do a lot of work in the multi-billion project example to do the alignment with the cost or SAP cost coding to be able to read data. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to use SAP data. So in that case, it's not Power BI giving you the benefit. What is giving you the benefit is the alignment using a key concept, which is the WBS. Well, and I learned that Power BI is not just to show beautiful visuals. It's impressively useful for data transformation and integration tools. So before, I wouldn't have been able to do an S-curve the way I do it now, knowing how powerful Power BI is to draw an S-curve, to do cash flows, to be able to customize my own cost profile, for example. That's amazing. That's replacing a lot of the work that we need in P6, for example. And don't think of Power BI as just the tool in which you read the data and then you do colorful things and you interact with things. It also helps you to integrate different data sources and transform them the way you need them. And the other thing we need to be careful of is we have to be flexible with Power BI, because different stakeholders are going to ask you for different things. It happens regardless the software you use for reporting. Power BI gives you the chance to customize your reports to attend all your report audience. And that's the main benefit as well against these project controls tools that like Ecosys, Prism, or Contrend now called. They are very strong softwares, but they normally provide out-of-the-box reporting, which is typically not exactly what you need, and that's what's going to happen. And Power BI gives you the chance to be so flexible, and you do whatever you want basically, and provide the report that you want by also integrating the same way these powerful tools do. So this is a very good benefit of using Power BI. And we have to blend the reporting architecture as well. So it happened to me that I was rushing sometimes trying to put in place Power BI reports when what I needed was to establish a process, an architecture that we have to follow to be able to implement Power BI reports. You have to evaluate and assess what are the data sources, how much data modeling you would require, how many access levels you need, how you're going to grant access to the reports, and you have to get your IT on board as well to to understand what are the risks on data leaks. The refresh frequency, sometimes it limits the performance. So typically in Power BI or in project controls, what I learned is that you don't really need to have live data every day. The most frequent I've used this is in a weekly way, and then monthly way is the typical approach that I think we use for project controls, and it's okay. So you have to think of that as well, because that's gonna impact your performance if you wanted to have very frequent. And try to make an interface that is very user-friendly with people. There's people that never used Power BI before, so you have to be mindful of those. And there's a lesson learned as well that I continue to promote until today is let's use files in the project controls space, thinking that they are data and they're data sources. And as small actions count. For example, in Excel, let's stop just putting numbers in Excel. Let's create an entity that is called a table and use them. That's going to make our lives easier when we have to produce Power BI reports. And documentation and governance, that's very important as well. So when you have to implement Power BI, you have to define roles and who's going to be in charge of troubleshooting and granted access and so on. Okay, I think I'm almost done. There's some AACE recommended practices. Nothing is applicable in the Power BI space, but it is relevant on the reporting space. So there is RP's recommended practices that are talking about organizational breakdown structure and responsibility assignment matrix, variance analysis. Just if you are proficient in the Power BI space, but not proficient in the project controls, then these recommended practices are going to help you. There's an RP for project code of accounts. Well, I think this is very relevant to Power BI because you're going to realize how useful it is when you create accounts for controlling your project. There's one that talks a little bit about how to retrieve and manage historical database for future use. But not really much around best practices on reporting. There might be some that might be missing, and I'm happy to hear opinions about this. But in my opinion, the ASE is lacking some recommended practices for project controls reporting. And that's it for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Frank. That was very informative. I must say, on the refresh on my last job, I was doing a power station outage, and we had it set every day because we were having to do daily updates and report back to the client. So yeah, you do need to do it more often, depending on what type of work you're doing. The other recommendation that I put forward for people who are trying to start using Power BI and typically have been using Excel in the past, go and do a database fundamentals course. Microsoft Learning has some nice short courses just to give you the fundamentals of how databases should be put together. It'll save you a lot of heartache because it'll let you understand why the structures need to be the way they are to get Power BI working effectively. So yeah, that's one thing I recommend to people so that they can get it up and running as quickly as possible. I will now unmute everybody, or allow the microphone for everybody, so you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question, and open the floor to everyone.